Hey guys, so today I will be taking a look at some new polls for the Georgia Senate runoffs. We did take a look at this very briefly yesterday, but Democrats have retaken the lead in the races for the Georgia Senate seats, these two seats that are going to decide the makeup of the U.S. Senate, as right now it is 50-48, so it means Democrats must win both seats, Republicans must just hold on to one seat for either party to gain a majority in the Senate, because of course the Democrats will control the vice presidency with Kamala Harris. So before we go any further, make sure you join my Discord server if you have not. The link is at the very top of the description below, and we'll be updating you guys a lot more on these races over there, and just a lot of discussion, and we're gonna be answering questions any of you guys have on these races. So taking a look at the latest polls for the Georgia Senate runoffs, as you can see, David Perdue and Jon Ossoff are currently in a tie. Yesterday, Jon Ossoff was leading by 0.4%, the first time he led since December 15th. And then between Raphael Warnock and Kelly Loeffler, as usual, Warnock is always doing just that little bit better than Jon Ossoff, and as you can see, Raphael Warnock leads over Kelly Loeffler by a margin of 0.4%. This is because of the latest Survey USA polls showing Jon Ossoff +5 adjusted to +4 and Warnock +7 adjusted to +5 by 538. And I mean, Survey USA is a very good pollster. They are A-rated, and if you were to take a look at their history, for the Georgia Senate races, they gave Perdue +3, and that was just 1 point away, I believe, because the margin for the Georgia race, it was a margin of 1.8%, so +3, that was pretty accurate for Survey USA. And I mean, comparing these to these other pollsters, I mean, Ossoff +6, Ossoff +1, comparing to a lot of pollsters, I mean, Emerson gave Emerson gave Warnock +5, but I mean, a lot of them Ossoff +5 and all of that. So Survey USA really was one of the most accurate pollsters for the Georgia races, and polls in Georgia, they are typically pretty correct. I mean, on the presidential level, as I've said many times, the polls are off by less than 1% on average on the presidential race. In this race, I mean, it is going to be very close. I mean, +0.4 for Warnock and a tie between Ossoff and Perdue as of right now. So this race, it's going to go down. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it was less than 1%. Recounts are very likely for these races. And taking a look at Survey USA's record for the race between Warnock and Loeffler, of course, Collins was also in this race. He was a Republican running against Loeffler, as of course Loeffler is not an incumbent. Well, she is an incumbent, but she was not elected to office. She took office just a little bit more than a year ago, so that's why Kelly Loeffler had a pretty significant Republican challenger who won 20% of the vote, and this poll was spot on for Loeffler and Collins. If you were to take a look at the actual results, Kelly Loeffler 25.9%, Doug Collins 20%, so it was off by 0.1 for Doug Collins, and spot on, 0.1 off for Kelly Loeffler and spot on for Doug Collins. For Raphael Warnock, they did underestimate him a little bit and overestimate Lieberman, but still, they did predict that Warnock was going to win, and I'm comparing comparing this to many of these other polls showing Warnock +12, +8. That was a little bit better, but +19. I mean, Survey USA is probably one of the best pollsters, and if we were to take a look at the 538 ratings for the pollsters, you have Survey USA at an 89% call correct rate, I guess. So basically 89%, they've been able to call 89% of their races correctly, and they've analyzed 787 polls. That is much more than any of these other pollsters. A-rated Marist College, just 183 polls, so that 787 gives them a lot higher chance of calling races incorrectly. They're graded A by 538, and their mean reverted bias is just Democrats +0.1. I mean, that is smaller than basically any pollster here. I mean, Emerson, that's a +0.3 for the Democrats, YouGov +0.4. So Survey USA is a pretty respected pollster, and I mean, their simple average error is much lower than many other pollsters. Marist College 5.4, They're A plus rated, but Survey USA is at 4.7. So Survey USA is a very good pollster, and they are currently giving both Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock some pretty strong leads, which I think is very good news for the Democratic Party. I think that, the races were looking a little bit not too great for the Democrats a couple days ago because Perdue was leading, and I think that when the race nears, if the Republicans are leading in the polls, I don't think Democrats have a chance. I think that the only chance the Democrats have in this race is if they were to be leading in the polls. I think that if they were down, I wouldn't say that they're going to win these races, just because the polls, they still do typically underestimate Republicans. Even on the presidential level in Georgia, they did underestimate the Republicans by just a little bit, much less than other states, but still it was an underestimation by the pollsters for the Republicans. And then taking a look at the early voting statistics, I mean, it has gone up 200,000 from yesterday. I mean, it was at 1.67 million votes for the early voting in the 2021 Senate runoffs in Georgia, but now it's 1.884 million. So put that into context, there were only 4.9 million votes cast in the regular election on November 3rd, and I mean, that was pretty high turnout, and for a runoff to have 2 million votes, almost 2 million, that is still pretty high. I mean, turnout typically, jumps off a cliff after the general election, and people in Georgia, they know how important this race is, which is why, I mean, we are still I believe a little bit under 2 weeks away until the race, and I mean, a lot of people are going to vote in person on January 5th still, so turnout, you might even hit 4 million, which would be very, very high for a runoff. I'm taking a look at the numbers. Turnout rate hasn't really changed too much, but the non-Hispanic white vote has jumped up to over 1 million. Non-Hispanic blacks are at 595,000, Hispanics 37, and other multiple or unknowns at 158,000 votes. That white vote obviously going to benefit the Republicans, but that black vote very, very heavily in favor of the Democrats. Taking a look at the voting by age, this is probably the biggest sign that isn't too great for the Democratic Party. It's just the sheer amount of elderly votes. I mean, those 66 and up, they vote a lot. I mean, 47.5 turnout rate already. I mean, this is before the actual election, but they do tend to vote earlier, the elderly population, so they're already at 700,000, making up almost half of everyone who voted. And I'm not half, but 37.1%, making 37.1% of everyone who voted. Turnout rate 47.5%. That is very, very high. If you take a look at 18 to 24, these are the newer voters. It's just 11.2% and 5.4% of the electorate in Georgia. That is very low. 25 to 34, it just increases as, they get older, because, the younger you are, the more likely you are to not vote. But the younger you are, the more likely, the more likely you are to vote for the Democratic Party, which does benefit the Democrats. These elderly voters, it's not that much in favor of the Republicans, but it is quite a bit in favor of them. Taking a look, those who did not vote in the 2020 general election, 57,000, that is pretty positive. Probably going to have some pretty high turnout. I wouldn't be surprised if it, rivaled that of the actual election. But, really this, like I've said, this is just a race about turnout. It's really not about, getting people to flip and vote for you as, it typically does, because this race is so close that both candidates have enough votes to win. I mean, if you take a look at the regular race on November 3rd, I mean, it was so close, and the margin was, less than 100,000 votes. And when, you have 4.9 million votes cast, that 100,000 really isn't that significant. Really, it's all about turnout, whether or not Jon Ossoff and David Perdue can turn out the voters that they need to get them across 50%. And right now, David Perdue, of course, does have the advantage, but Jon Ossoff, definitely don't discount him. He definitely, if he, Stacey Abrams, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, wants to step in and they do campaigning for the Democrats. I think, Barack Obama had a big, part in Joe Biden's win there. He campaigned quite a bit very late in the campaign for Biden in Georgia, and I mean what Stacey Abrams has done over the past 2 years has definitely benefited the Democrats there. And I think that if they're to continue to do that, getting more voters to vote, Democrats definitely have a very, very high chance at winning this election. And finally, I do want to take a look at an election forecast. This is by Thomas Miller. His forecast gave Joe Biden and Kamala Harris 294 electoral votes. They eventually won 306, of course, much more accurate than 538, who gave Joe Biden, Kamala Harris 348 electoral votes. And he uses his political horizon plot, which we're going to take a look at. This was just updated 5 hours ago. So this is the plot for Jon Ossoff versus David Perdue. As you can see, those blue dots show Jon Ossoff's chances at winning. So this is the chance winning percentage for the Democratic challenger, which is Jon Ossoff. As you can see, his chances were pretty low early on, but it did increase and it did fall quite a bit in the last couple of days. However, very recently it has increased, and you see that he is currently sitting at around 32-33%, as you can see, 32.7% to David Perdue at 67.3% for his chances of victory. And, here you see all the major events that occurred. As early voting began, Jon Ossoff's chances spiked, and then, the Trump rally actually didn't help them. But Biden had a drive-in rally, so really, what Biden and Trump are doing here really hasn't had too much of a change. But that debate did actually decrease Jon Ossoff's chances, which I did find kind of surprising. But we'll see what happens. 32.7% is much higher than Trump's chances, by almost every forecast in the 2016 election. So definitely doesn't mean Jon Ossoff is going to lose, because, some forecasts gave Trump, 4%, 8% in 2016 of winning the election. This is around the chances that 538 gave for Donald Trump 4 years ago. And then taking a look at the plot between Raphael Warnock and Kelly Loeffler. So of course, this is the chances for Warnock, and his chances are, of course, a little bit higher because Loeffler is a little bit of a weaker candidate than Perdue. So you have 38.6% for Raphael Warnock, and Kelly Loeffler sits at 61.4% chance of victory. And this plot is really pretty similar. Of course, you saw that dip early on, and then you saw the chances decrease over the last couple of days. However, very recently it has increased once again. So this is hourly estimates, so he really does update, or not hourly estimates, I'm not sure, but he updates this very, very frequently. I'm not sure if, I believe it's every day, so he updates this quite a bit, and I'll be, probably updating you guys on these plots, because it does show both candidates' chances over time, which is really something that you can't really see too much for the Georgia runoff races, which I think is pretty interesting. And this again is for Jon Ossoff and David Perdue. So the chances aren't looking the greatest for the Democrats, but definitely not at a point where they really have no chance of victory. So basically, the polling has improved for the Democrats. Raphael Warnock has taken the lead. Jon Ossoff took the lead, for a day, and then he has lost it today. They're now tied, Ossoff and Perdue. So that will be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Check out these other videos on your screen. Comment down below who you think is going to win the runoff races. And so I will see all of you guys in the next video.